Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first panel discussion of International Jazz Day in Osaka. Thank you for coming. I would like to thank our distinguished guests, His Excellency, UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, Mr. Herbie Hancock. And UNESCO Artist for Peace, Mr. Marcus Miller. Now, these two artists do not really need an introduction, but I would give a very, very brief introduction. Mr. Hancock is an American icon. He has won multiple Grammy Awards, as well as an Academy Award, Kennedy Honors, and a multitude of other prizes and honors. His vast career, spanning from his early teens with the Miles Davis Quartet to his solo work with Cantaloupe Island, Watermelon Man, Maiden Voyage, to his crossover Rocket, to The River, the Joni Letters, which won the Album of the Year award at the Grammys. The body of work is breathtaking, both in scope and in terms of the accomplishments achieved. Mr. Miller is a legend in his own right. He is a bassist, a producer, a composer, and a multi-instrumentalist. He has worked with artists such as Michael Jackson, Mariah Carey, Wayne Shorter, Frank Sinatra, Elton John, and countless others, and has performed in over 500 recordings. Yeah. As a composer, he wrote all but 2 songs on the Miles Davis Tutu album, which redefined Miles Davis's career in the 80s. It is an honor to be sitting here with both of them. Thank you. Today we'll discuss the concept of an artist for peace. What does this entail? What is the potential and impact that artists can have for peace building? Why are they in a unique position to communicate universal values? Why do artists have a unique ability to encourage and influence positive social change? And what can jazz music teach us about creating successful diplomatic ties between people of radically different cultures, language, and views? So first, I'd like to start with His Excellency, UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, Herbie Hancock. Herbie, can you explain to us why you became involved with UNESCO?
I had been feeling that a sense of my perspective of my life was deeper than just myself as a musician. That I really was in a moment of inspiration, discovering that, or uncovering that at the core of me, I'm a human being. Because I'm only a musician when I'm playing music, talking about music, thinking about music. But I don't do that 24 hours a day. I'm also a husband, a father, a son, a neighbor, a citizen. And so all these are different aspects of me. But the one thing that connects everything is the fact that I'm a human being. And from that realization that I had one day about 15 years ago or so, I began to concentrate on building my life from this newer perspective of myself. And so the idea of moving forward as a human being and with the desire to do everything I could to encourage other human beings, to share and respect human life, respect the planet, and do what jazz really has been doing since its inception, which is to bring people together. But not just coming from the fact that I'm a musician, but coming from the fact that I'm a human being. You know, that was the most important thing. So, because actually you, Mika, and I had brainstorming sessions when in Paris when we were working on performance for Philosophers' Day, which you started. You were the founder of that. From those brainstorming sessions, and you pointed out to me that you thought I would be an excellent Goodwill ambassador. I was so shocked because inside it was really a dream of mine to have something like that presented to me. And you were surprised that I was even interested. And I said, of course, are you kidding? And I didn't think it would happen until eventually it did, and I was appointed Goodwill ambassador. I was so happy to have the opportunity to use everything in my being, and of course, including my music, but not just my music alone. You know, I'm not restricted to doing things only with music, but of course, jazz has been such an important part of my life, and it has always functioned in the capacity of cultural diplomacy. That this gave me a great opportunity to present the idea and the proposal to UNESCO for International Jazz Day, and that was really the beginning.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have to say that as a UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, you are probably the most active and engaged. By creating this International Jazz Day, it has become an incredible worldwide event. Perhaps you'd like to say a few words about that, the global events and the outreach.
First of all, this is the third annual International Jazz Day. We thought that in the beginning, what we had accomplished for the very first one 2 years ago was amazing, beyond our dreams. But we had no idea how much the idea, the exposure, the effect of International Jazz Day would be. And we've received so many letters and responses from even small countries that most of the world kind of ignores. They are so pleased that they are being recognized as on a par with the huge countries like the United States or Germany or France, you know, and because of the support of jazz that has come from Japan for so many years. I mean, these small countries were feeling that they were empowered. They were being recognized for the first time, and they loved it. They love it. It's so important to them, and they were emotionally affected by that. But also, so many countries that have recently been in conflict. We know that Syria, for example, we received word that, and you have the details, Mika, about this. Some musicians in Syria are going to be celebrating International Jazz Day, even though their homes have been completely destroyed. Many family members have been killed. But they are feeling courage and hope and inspiration for being recognized, not just for conflict, but being recognized for the fact that they are important to the world, as human beings that have a viable culture. And they know that jazz is an international music, and the flavor of their culture is very often included in how they play jazz. It's amazing, you know, and you know, some of the letters that they sent back opened up ideas that I never even realized pertaining to the effect of our outreach to these countries in support of International Jazz Day, which is completely egalitarian. I mean, we are all equal on International Jazz Day. It doesn't matter how small the village is or how huge the country is. Everyone is being respected for their culture, for their humanity, for their heart.
Absolutely, beautifully said. Thank you, Herbie. Now, Marcus, I would also like to ask you how you became involved as a UNESCO Artist for Peace and why you felt the urge to get involved.
Well, the easiest answer is I went to the ceremony where Herbie was named an ambassador for peace by UNESCO probably 3 years ago. Was it 3 years ago that you were? Yeah. We were just finishing a tour, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, and I, in Europe, and we had just finished the tour, and Herbie was going to be named in Paris as an artist for peace. So they invited me to come along, and it was so beautiful, the idea of an artist for peace, and it made so much sense. But going back for me, you know, I remember my first experience with the power of music and the power of jazz in particular was when I came to Japan the first time, right? You know, when we start making music, everybody starts making music for different reasons. But for me, I started making music because I loved the way it made me feel. It was a very personal reason for playing music. I just loved the experience of playing in a band and playing the bass. And, you know, I came to Japan with Sadao Watanabe the first time. And, you know, I could barely tell you, I was 19 years old, I could barely tell you where Japan was on the map. Okay? But when we got here, we landed and we got on a bus from the airport from Narita, and we ended up in Tokyo. And in front of the hotel were all these kids waiting for this pop group. I assumed they were waiting for this pop group to arrive. And then I realized that they were waiting for us. And I'm looking behind me for Menudo or somebody like that. And it was us they were waiting for. And it turned out that they knew every recording that we had played on up to that date. They knew the details of every recording. There were American fans who didn't know the details of music like these Japanese fans knew. And over the years, I'd come to Japan, and fans would be in the hotel lobby with literally 100 LPs for me to sign, each one an LP that I played on, you know. They're crazy, you know. But it was such a beautiful thing to see how music traveled and to see how music affected people on the other side of the world. It was amazing. And because of the reaction that we got from them, it made me want to learn about Japanese culture, you know. I started asking questions. I wanted it to be not so one-sided, where they love what we do, but we don't know anything about what they do. So I got into it, man, and I started learning some Japanese, and I was on the stage. Bando no minasan wo shogai shimasu. Right? I was into it. But that's what music does. And that was my first experience. And, you know, I've had other experiences. You mentioned Tutu, the album I worked on with Miles. I had an experience after we did that album. A few years later, I took a trip to South Africa. And this interviewer said to me, what does it feel like to have made the most important African-American contribution to our struggle for freedom in South Africa, right? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, Tutu, do you know how much strength that piece of music gave us? Because Tutu was a dedication to Bishop Desmond Tutu, who, along with Nelson Mandela, was doing such fantastic work fighting against apartheid in the 80s in South Africa. So I said, no, I had no idea that you even heard Tutu, because I assumed that, you know, the government was preventing you from hearing things like that. And he said, brother, when we need to hear it, we find ways to hear it. And it was amazing. It was an amazing feeling to see the power of music. You know, then you have people from, you know, from Russia, or from people from Europe, or from South America, who say, hey, man, I'd like you to introduce you to my little son. His name is Marcus. Wow. That changes you. You know, that changes you. You no longer are making music just for yourself when that happens. You start to realize that you have in your hands a really powerful tool. You know, we go all around the world, and, you know, just like in Japan, where initially we don't even know how to say hello, we play music, and all of a sudden we're a family, you know? And I have people who are dear friends in Japan, in Africa, in South America, in France, Germany, Italy, because of the music, you know? So, getting back to when I went to this ceremony where they appointed Herbie Hancock as a peace ambassador, I was like, man, this is really cool, because I had been looking for a way to continue that story on my own. You know what I mean? How can I formalize this power that music has? And this seemed like a perfect way. Then the guy goes and does Jazz Day, which is, it's such an incredible idea because it seems so simple, and it seems like it's always been. And I know that to be true because when I talk to people, they say, what are you doing? I'm getting ready to go do Jazz Day, International Day of Jazz, and they go, what is this, like the 10th anniversary? I said, no, man, this is number 3. They said, are you kidding me? That hasn't existed for years? I go, no, but it seems like it has, because it's such a natural idea. And those ideas are always the best ideas, the ideas that seem like, well, of course, why didn't anybody think of that before? Those are incredible ideas. So anyway, that was my path. Herbie Hancock has this big footprint, and I just put my shoes right in the footprint and got behind them.
Thank you. And so as these ambassadors, Artists for Peace, how do you see your role evolving in the future? What are your hopes? What would you like to accomplish beyond what's already been accomplished?
Well, I'm hoping that International Jazz Day will be a gateway for opening up a path for that goes beyond jazz, but unites cultures, unites ideas, that opens this bridge so that people from various parts, various corners of the world can dialogue, can discuss misinformation that they have about other countries or other people or other religions, and which really are the source of conflicts that are happening in the world today. Misunderstanding and misinformation, and being guided very often by powerful people who are expressing ideas that are detrimental toward human beings being able to work together in peace. You know, people who are actually doing this because of greed, very often, because of this greed for power or greed for money, and those are the wrong goals. The goals that are the most important in life aren't those that you can buy with money. The most important goals in life are not about information and knowledge. It's about wisdom, a word that most of us perhaps have forgotten, about courage, about compassion. You know, those about respect for each other. The great thing about jazz is that without even saying a word, musicians are automatically doing that. They're being non-judgmental. They're working together, not thinking about, oh, I didn't like what the bass player played, or I didn't like what the guitar player played. You know, once you start judging another musician's music when you're on the stage, the music stops. The flow stops. So musicians are always concerned about how can I take whatever happens and to make it blossom, to turn it into some beautiful flower, turn it into a wonderful creation that fits what we did just a moment ago. You know, make this moment be a valuable moment, always creating value in the moment through sharing, through respect for each other, through embracing each other, through trusting each other, but at the same time, trusting yourself, trusting your own ability to be able to respond to what anyone else plays because of you trusting your heart. I mean, these kinds of values are the values that jazz promotes. And we have an example here. There's a group of young musicians, female musicians, here in Japan called the Swing Dolphins. And there are 24 members of this group from elementary school and junior high school that were ready to play a concert, and then they were in the area of the tsunami, and I guess near Fukushima, right?
In the Tohoku region.
Yeah, and so actually almost everything was wiped out, but they were able to receive instruments that came actually from America, from Tipitina's. It's a great club in New Orleans. Musicians from New Orleans had actually donated instruments. And let me quote from this article that says, a week before the show, a large consignment arrived that included trumpets, saxophones, and trombones, the result of a generous $11,200 offering from Tipitina's Foundation, a musical nonprofit in New Orleans. And the gift was a return gesture of gratitude to the Dolphins, who, in the wake of 2005's Hurricane Katrina, raised and donated $125 to the Red Cross through their own benefit concert. I mean, it's so amazing that this gratitude that moved from Japan to America, and then from America back to Japan in a time of crisis, you know, when people, sometimes it's crisis that brings out the best of the human spirit, you know, and so you actually, in that way, are turning poison into medicine, which is fantastic. I mean, that's the whole idea. This actually works in with what I said about jazz. No matter what happens on the stage, you know, even if someone plays the wrong chord, to turn that chord into the right one. Miles Davis did that to me one time, you know. Yeah, and in that crucial moment, to be able to respond and you know, through your own compassion, through your own trust and caring, to bring out the best that you have, to turn a crisis or a challenge into benefit or something of great value to help the happiness of some other human being. And I just want to read just one quote from one of the young ladies in the Swing Dolphins band. Actually, it's a quote from her mother. Now, this is an 11-year-old girl. Her name is Amane Iwabuchi. Her mother, Kikuko, said, "At the time, we were just worried about shortages of food and clothing. Well, when I saw my child smiling brightly for the first time in weeks, I realized music provided her with something that healed her soul." And I think that says everything.
Absolutely, that's beautiful. Now, you just mentioned about jazz being non-judgmental and about your experience with Miles Davis. Could you just share that story? Because it's such a beautiful story of what happened, literally, with you.
Okay. This was amazing. I played with Miles Davis's band from 1963 until 1968. And I think it might have been around 1966 or 67 that we played a concert. I believe it was in Sweden. And it was part of a tour. But this was turning out to be the best night of the whole tour. You know, it's always one night that really sticks out as the best one. The band is on fire, and the audience was with us. I mean, we had just captured the hearts of the audience, and so this was a journey. It was almost like a team between not only the musicians, but with the audience was part of that team. And the spirit was so strong. Everything was moving. Everybody was all together. And we were in the middle of the concert, and everything was building and building. And then Miles started to play his solo. And Tony Williams, the drummer, was on fire. And Wayne Shorter was on fire. Ron Carter, bass player, he was on fire. And Miles got to the peak of his solo. And then I played this chord that was so wrong. I thought that I was the tsunami and destroyed everything. I felt awful. I wanted to crawl under the rug. And Miles took a breath, and he played some notes that made my chord right. It made everything fit somehow. Only thing I could do was gasp. I didn't know what happened. How did he do that? It took me years to figure out one simple thing. Miles didn't judge my chord. I did. That's the difference. He was not judgmental. He listened, he heard it as an event. And he's thinking, what can I do with this? You know? He used it for inspiration. It taught me a big lesson. We all have the ability to turn challenge into inspiration and to share that with other people. It's a big lesson.
Such a beautiful story. Now, Marcus, as an artist for peace, one of your role is part of many of your roles is to be a spokesperson for the Slave Root Project. Would you like to say a bit about that and share with the audience?
Yeah, well, when I tell people that I'm the spokesperson for the Slave Roots Project, a lot of older people say, well, is that really necessary? Because everyone knows the history of slavery. But I think what people would be surprised to find out is that with each generation, people know less and less about the story, the history of slavery. And that's a dangerous thing because, you know, when people begin to forget history, we all know what happens. It starts to repeat itself. Even at this very moment, there's still slavery that's happening in different parts of the world. So it's not by any means been eradicated. But what's important to me is just to make sure that people don't forget and that young people know the story of slavery. It's of course, a really tragic chapter in America's history. And but what I'm trying to do is make sure that it's not just a tragic story. And the way that music plays into this, the way that jazz plays into this is, think about this, in early America, I'm talking about in the 1800s and the very early 1900s, America was considered as a new country that didn't really have its own identity, particularly a cultural identity. It was too new. And the music that came out of America in that period was basically an imitation of European music. So Europeans considered the music that came out of America cute, you know, like the creation of a younger society, right? And then all of a sudden, Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong took a trip to Europe with this new music that they had never heard before. And the Europeans were like, whoa, this didn't come from us. This is not an imitation of us. And what they were hearing was the culmination of this experience in America that was unique to America, where these people who had been slaves for hundreds of years, who had been brought against their will from Africa, had somehow taken this terrible condition, right? And they had turned it into something. They had taken the music that they carried with them from Africa. They had taken the European music that was being presented to them in America. They took influences from everywhere in their new situation, and they created something new that ended up being the cultural calling card for America, right? So people all around the world who didn't consider America a fully fledged society, and they certainly didn't consider the African Americans a fully developed subset of American culture. All of a sudden, they had to respect African Americans because they created something that was so fantastic, and they had to respect America in general. So I think that this music is really a victory for these Africans who were brought against their will into slavery. And it just shows you that the spirit of people is so strong, and it's very difficult to break the spirit of a people. This music is evidence of that. And I think that's the thing that scared so many societies, not societies, but that's the thing that scared so many leaders about jazz. Jazz was forbidden in many countries in the world because there was something about this music that was so obviously about freedom that it scared people. You know, there were periods in Germany where jazz was forbidden. There are places even today where they try to suppress jazz because there's just something about hearing a music where everyone gets to express themselves, where everyone gets to do their own thing, but somehow makes it work within the situation of a group. That is just really powerful and gives people some really cool ideas about their own life. And I think that's scary. But International Jazz Day is proof that everyone's coming around to this idea. And this music is very powerful, and it's a great model for how we can have intercultural communication and people can find their own freedom through the arts.
Absolutely. And you have a piece called Garre, which was fundamental in your role as UNESCO Artist for Peace. Could you share your experience about that?
Sure. We took a tour and did a concert in Senegal, Africa, about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. And I had heard about the island of Garre. It's an island off the coast of Senegal in Western Africa, and it was basically a place where they would keep the captive Africans for about 3 months. They would keep them there on this island, and they would check them out to see how healthy they were. They would count how many of them they had. And eventually, after about 3 months, they would take them and ship them off on these big boats into slavery.
Yeah, but I just want to say, they weren't just living on the island out in the land.
Right.
They were captured as prisoners.
Yes. Yes.
In these caves.
Yes.
On the
yes.
island of
yes.
Garre. I've been there too. So
absolutely, yes. They were prisoners. They were captured from inland Africa, brought to the coast, and then moved onto this island. And they were kept in these rooms. There were 3 rooms, one for men, for women, for children, and they were very small, and they would stack these captives in these rooms, one on top of the other. It was horrible.
Yeah, the worst of circumstances.
And then after
no
a while,
sanitation.
Right. Oh, they were like, it was like literally like animals, right? And so we took a tour of this, of the place where they kept the Africans. It was called Une Maison des Esclaves, which is French for a slave house. And like I said, I heard about it, so I thought I was emotionally prepared to visit this island. You know, I was like, yeah, I know the story, you know. But man, being there is a whole different thing. When you're standing there looking at the room, which is not as big as this area here, and you imagine 40 slaves, 40 captives, you know, crammed into this room, and you imagine that they've been pulled out of their life, of their culture, and then that wasn't even the worst of their situation, because then they were put on a boat, in the bottom of a boat, and they had to travel for weeks, for months, across the Atlantic Ocean. It's just unimaginable. So I decided to write a piece of music about what I was feeling standing there in that slave house. And my band, my young band members were there with me, and all of us were just so emotionally moved by this visit. So I wrote this tune, I named it Garre, and you know, we've been playing it for about a couple of years, but it was instrumental in this journey with UNESCO, because I performed the piece in Paris, and the directress of UNESCO, Madame Bokava, she was in the audience, and I explained the story of Garre, and then I performed the song. And after the concert, she came backstage, and she's a very wonderful, sophisticated woman, but she was excited. She was like, listen, you've got to be the spokesperson for the Slave Root Project. And I didn't even know what it was. But I was like, if you're going to be this excited, then I'm going to do it, okay? Because it sounds wonderful. And that's how I got into it. What I would like to do is maybe visit all the slave sites. And by slave sites, I mean the ports like Garre, where the slaves were shipped. I'd like to visit the places where they were sold. I'd like to, in South America and the Caribbean and North America, visit the places where they were bought, and just make a connection and video it and show it to young people and try to get them not to hear about this story, but to feel this story like I felt it when I was standing there on that island of Garre.
And I think it's important to know that one of the reasons why Madame Bokova, the Director General of UNESCO, was so moved by your piece was because it wasn't just about the negative.
Right.
It's also about celebrating life.
Yes. Well, you know, when I explain the song, I tell the audience that I didn't want the song to be just about the anger and the hurt and the pain that I was feeling when I stood there in that slave house, because I also wanted to make it a testament to human beings' ability to transcend you know, horrible situations and find something. I mean, as African American slaves, all you really had was music, you know. At the beginning, you didn't even have instruments, you know, working in these fields, you know, picking cotton in the heat. And all you could do was sing. That was your only comfort, you know. And then eventually we got access to old instruments, whatever we could get a hold of, and created this wonderful music that was our only, that was our savior, this music, you know. And I think because that's what jazz evolved out of, that situation. I think you can hear it every time you hear jazz. I think you can hear how important that music, how emotional that music is. It's not just notes. It carries our whole history with it. And I think everyone understands that when they hear it.
Yeah, I think that the spirit of the slavery project, people can identify with that spirit because everyone knows. I mean, within their own lives, there are situations where they feel kind of enslaved by some negative or challenging situation. Maybe they haven't seen on a one-to-one relationship between their own lives and the lives of the African American slaves, but they can feel that humanity and that connection to challenge and problems that have plagued them in their own lives, no matter where they came from. And this is what that makes your project important, but it also makes jazz and culture in general so important.
Well, that's what we hear at the end of our concerts, because yes, a lot of people don't have, like you say, a one-to-one connection with this slave experience, but just the idea of taking that horrible an experience and turning something and creating something beautiful with it is inspirational to everyone. You know, some people actually connect it to an oppressive situation in their own culture, but other people, like you say, just connect it to their own lives, their own personal lives, and say, you know, if someone can endure that, I absolutely can endure what I'm going through in my personal life. Absolutely.
We all have the ability, if each and every one of us has the ability to turn poison into medicine. I mean, it's built into our fiber as human beings. We have this infinite ability to be able to change any and everything by actually making a transformation in ourselves. That's the most important thing. And that's how we can encourage and help each other. That's why we're here, is to not only become happy, but to help other people become happy and overcome their sufferings and their sorrows and be an encouragement to each other.
I think it's very important what you're talking about, the universality of the message of jazz, and that struggle and oppression is universal. It's something that everybody experiences. And I think that's why Jazz Day has resonated in so many societies where there is conflict and oppression and struggle. So that's beautiful.
You know, the idea of turning poison into medicine, I mean, even the medical profession does that. You know, that's what inoculations are. You know, it's like small bits of things that in large amounts would make you sick, but you develop the ability to fight them off when they introduce this into your system. And then in a more general sense, just being able to have difficult situations be interpreted in your mind differently, saying, you know what, this is, yes, I could look at this as a horrible situation, but instead I choose to look at it differently. That's so powerful. It seems so trite at first. You know, I'm just going to look at things differently. You know what I mean? But and sometimes you feel like you're going to battle a lion with a feather. You know what I mean? But you don't understand how strong that feather is. You know, if you just go, you know what? I'm going to change this. I'm not going to let this be just a negative experience. I'm going to turn this into something positive. That's a hugely powerful weapon.
Yeah, that's human revolution. You know, that transformation that happens inside. Yeah.
And that Miles Davis story he told, where he played the absolute wrongest note he could ever play, and Miles made it into something beautiful. He does that. I've seen him do that for years now. You know, I mean, he took the lesson, that beautiful lesson that Miles gave him, and I've seen him turn really ugly notes played by other musicians into beautiful things, because he's now one of the most non-judgmental musicians I've ever played with, you know, and it's from him taking that story that I'm sure Miles may have learned from somebody. He took that story and he's continuing it on, you know, and I got to admit, earlier in my life, man, if somebody played something wrong, I'd look at him like, man, what's wrong with you? But, you know, after being exposed to him, you know, I'll take a breath and go, let me see if I can make something out of that, you know? So the story gets passed along, you know? Not just in music, but this is the way you deal with people also, you know? So it's really important.
Well, that's the other thing about jazz, by the way, in that I know, and I'm sure you, of course, you know this too, that musicians that are older than us, you know, the elder statesmen of jazz before us, shared their experience. I mean, they hired you when you were 19,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And they shared their experience with you, encouraged you, gave you the opportunity to grow and to blossom and to expand, you know, to open your eyes and your ears.
Yes.
And and you are continuing that legacy, you know,
yes.
as a mentor for young people, you know, to share your experiences with them, and at the same time to learn from young people.
Yes. Yes.
Because,
in the same way
you know,
that Miles learned from you guys, you know, he was
exactly.
the old guy in the band, and you guys were like the new guys. But I remember specifically Miles talking about when he hired these guys in his band. He was playing a certain way in the 1950s. He hired these guys, Wayne, Tony, Ron, and Herbie in the 60s, and these guys were playing something different that Miles hadn't heard before. And Miles said, I got to go home and practice. And to his credit, to Miles's credit, he came up with a way to play with these guys, because it's not easy to play with Tony Williams, Ron Carter, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter. He found a way to climb back on top of that wave and surf, you know? And it was beautiful because they learned from him, and he learned from them. One more thing I'd like to inject here is that another wonderful thing about jazz is that it really breaks down prejudices, right? Because everyone, whether they want to admit it or not, whether they realize it or not, they all have preconceptions. They all have their own prejudices, you know? For example, if a female sits down at the drum set, right? A lot of musicians are like, oh no, I wonder if this is going to be, you know, if this is going to be good.
A girl playing the drums?
A girl playing the drums.
A male,
yeah.
traditionally male instrument,
yes.
right?
And all of a sudden, she goes, bang! And she starts playing, and all the guys go, oh, she's good, let's go.
Right.
They
Like Terry Lynn.
Yeah, like Terry Lynn. They had preconceptions, right? And as soon as she proved with a couple of notes that she could play, they vanished. The preconceptions vanished, and it was back to making music, you know? The same thing with race, same thing with culture, you know what I mean? Guys come up on the bandstand, this guy's not from Detroit, this guy's not from Chicago, this guy's from you know, India, or this guy's from Switzerland, you know? And we go, oh, I wonder what this is going to be. And he goes, bibbidi, bibbidi. Oh, okay, let's go. It's fine. That's beautiful. You know what I mean? That's the all-inclusive nature of jazz. If you can play, it doesn't matter.
So beautiful. I mean, we can go on and talk for a long time. I would love to be able to take some questions one or two questions from the audience. If I see a hand back there, can we get a mic? Could you go to the back?
Mr. Herbie Hancock and Mr. Marcus Miller, thank you very much for a great opportunity to have such a great concert and also great discussions. I'm impressed with the International Jazz Day, the kind of gateway to unite the world, and also Marcus-san's comment as gathering the power of the music and the ideas and make a transformation. So, じゃあ日本語でいきますね。すみません。今回の、すみません、日本語です。インターナショナルジャズデーで、197カ国でしたっけが参加されたと。
196。
すみません、196カ国が参加されたというふうに聞いていまして。
The member states are celebrating Jazz Day.
そう、インターナショナルジャズデーが世界を結びつけて平和にするだけではなくて、196カ国分の多様性をジャズが吸収して、ジャズを変えていくんじゃないかという期待をちょっと持っているんですけれども、例えばこれインターナショナルジャズデーがあと10年ぐらい経った時にジャズが大きく形を変えているんじゃないかというような期待がもしもあれば教えていただきたいのと、でただエンターテインメントビジネスとしてアメリカから世界への流れは簡単ですが逆向けが非常に難しいという状況がありますので、そこを変えていくことができるのか、でそれとジャズを演奏するというにあたってグルーブをアメリカのグループを学びながらその国のグループを否定するということを取ってしまいがちになるので、そこの各国の音楽を大事にするっていうのをどういうふうに教えたらいいのかというあたりを教えてください。
He's asking that since there are 196 countries celebrating today, there's a potential for jazz to transform the world, basically. And he's saying that in 10 years, it could really make an impact. So that's his first question that I would like to... How do you see that the potential of Jazz Day in 10 years, in 20 years, in the future?
Nobody can predict the potential because, I mean, the potential is not confined to some box that we can predetermine.
So my point is there is a diversity, a huge diversity of 196 countries' music traditions. So it will make jazz for some transform.
Well, the fantastic thing is that, for example, people who are in countries where there's extreme conflict, like for example, Central African Republic, the ones that are participating in International Jazz Day are feeling a sense of hope and inspiration because there's something that they can actually do that they're being recognized for that is positive. And it's not just carrying guns and shooting people, even for their own protection, but it's something that they're contributing to the world, something of beauty that they're contributing to the world, that they're being recognized for. This in itself is planting a seed of goodness, a seed of advancement, a seed toward peaceful resolutions in the future. When that happens, we don't know, but we do know that we're all planting seeds.
Marcus, would you like to say a few words? And that'll have to be the last.
Well, I absolutely agree that the potential is limitless. And then also, I think that Jazz Day can be, for instance, each year Jazz Day can be the focal point. And then we can go out into the field as musicians, as ambassadors for peace, and we can connect with people on a more personal level. They've already been opened to the idea of jazz. For me, the important thing is to catch people when they're young, early in their development. You know, for example, I told you the first time I came to Japan, I was 19 years old. And the people who were listening to our music were also very young, you know. And we developed our own relationship that had nothing to do with history books or magazines or newspapers or what older people would tell us we should feel or think about each other. The ideas and the feelings we had for each other were personal. And I think that that's really important if you can help shape a young person's consciousness by going there. For example, we just did a clinic in southern Russia, right? We played for a school. And it was for young people, and we had a great time, right? Now, these young people, it's going to be very difficult for someone to come and tell them anything about jazz or about Americans or about anything like that because they've experienced it personally, you know? So it's really important to make a connection with people when they're young. And I think International Day of Jazz, I just call it Jazz Day because my mouth gets tired. But with Jazz Day, this is great because this is what you're going to see. Hopefully, maybe somebody in your school or maybe somebody in your community is going to open you up to the idea of jazz. And then I would like to close the deal by coming in there and really making a one-to-one connection with people.
Well, thank you so much for your wisdom and your vision. It's just wonderful to be able to listen to both of you. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much for joining us.